So today we are going to sort of know and learn about a very different type of research method called qualitative research. And my wish at the beginning of this session would be at least few of you who is listening will have interest on qualitative research methods and proceed in the future to promote and conduct this lovely sort of methods. Okay. In this session, now I understood by talking to Pratibha as well that you all are interested in doing research, and the idea of conducting these sessions is to sort of have a practical guidance on research methods so that you could apply them with your work. So implying to that, we will today go through on firstly having an understanding of what qualitative research is and the purpose of conducting qualitative research. Then we will see what are the different methods available for us to collect qualitative data, what are the specific procedures that we should carry out while doing qualitative studies, and one of the commonest methods that commonest questions that come across. So how do you avoid biases? How, in qualitative science we call it, how do you protect trustworthiness of the research, right? So then we will move on as the time permits. We will move on to have a basic understanding on how to analyze qualitative data and also to how to present qualitative data. So in this session, I will be sort of relating my experience and providing you with resources available, analyzing things, but specifying on a confined population and going into what works there, what is the reality. I hope you could mute yourselves. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, madam. Your mic is muted.
So I hope it happened recently, right? Not from
Yes,
the
madam,
beginning.
just recently.
About 30 seconds.
Okay, I understand. Right. Okay, so we were talking about mixed method studies where you can combine qualitative and quantitative methods, where you use the qualitative methods to identify the reality behind a phenomenon and use that data to construct quantitative measures such as questionnaires, so that ultimately the estimates that you get are very realistic, right? So that is a step further going into mixed methods. Okay, so let's learn what qualitative methods are. Let's just peep into what qualitative methods are, right? So what is qualitative research? The researchers are interested in understanding the meaning people have constructed, right? So what do people mean by something, right? When they describe about something, what is the real meaning? What happens in the reality, right? How people make sense of their world, right? How do different people see their world? How do different, say, if we combine it to clinical practice, how do different people see or sense about their disease, right? And the experiences they have in the world. So the experiences a person would have during, say, health seeking, getting treated, undergoing surgery, or during the post-op period, and so on, if we relate it to clinical practice. Further going into this, qualitative research provides information about the human side of an issue, right? මොකක් හරි සංසිද්ධියක මානුෂීය පැත්ත, right? So we investigate the behaviors, beliefs, opinions, emotions of people, and relationships of individuals with regard to a particular health topic. And also in qualitative research, we can sort of identify the intangible factors. So what do you mean by intangible factors? The factors that are not sort of captative or visible, easily visible factors, right? Is easily not captured. So because we go in depth down into the knowledge or study or reality, we are able to capture intangible factors such as social norms, gender roles, right? Ethnic and religious influences on specific phenomena, right? Which will not be very apparent in sort of collecting data through merely a quantitative questionnaire. So to make it simple, let's take a phenomenon, we will name it X, right? In quantitative research, we usually measure how big X is or how much X's are there, right? Or maybe is there a significant difference between X and Y? But in qualitative research, we would focus on what X really means. How does it manifest? And so on. If we take an example, let's say if we are talking about, say, post-operative pain management, right? Using quantitative research, we might see, maybe we will use a scale, right? To see how much of a pain score that a patient would get. What would be the maximal score for in the pain sort of scale that a patient would get post-operatively after a particular pain management technique, right? And we will see how much of patients would have high pain scores. Or we will see whether there's a significant difference between the mean pain scores of pain management via two different types of methods, right? But if you want to apply qualitative research for this type of topic, there you will understand what do you really mean by a patient feeling pain during the post-operative period, right? So details of when does it start, how severe it is, how he or she assimilated into the environment, history, or in likewise context, right? What are the implications of that? How does it manifest and so on. So the reality behind what the patient's experience is detected through qualitative studies. So simply, we are going to the meaning, right? How people see the world, and we study the world in which people act. So the patient is not sort of separated from the environment, right? In qualitative studies, we study the patient within the environment. We study the process, what actions and activities people do, and the reasons why people act in such a manner. Okay, so I hope you had sort of an introductory idea on what qualitative research is. right? So when you formulate your proposals for qualitative studies, so one of the first things, of course, you find a research gap, and there are many gaps in identifying reality. So you can readily rationalize qualitative studies. You can say that no in-depth qualitative studies are done on this topic, right? Done on this context, because qualitative studies are mostly context specific, right? Then you step on to the objective. When you formulate objective, I'm sure you have got lessons on formulating objectives. When you form objectives on qualitative studies, right, you use the active verbs to explore or to describe, right? Not sort of in as such as in quantitative research, not to determine, right? Likewise, not to determine the association, likewise, but to explore and describe. So, for example, to explore the reasons for non-compliance to treatment among this type of patients, to describe the post-operative experiences of patients undergoing this surgery, right? That type of objective you may include in your study. So when exactly we use qualitative methods, right? So usually we don't select the type of methods according to our wish, right? We should select the type of method according to the circumstances that we are going to study, right? So as I described so far, qualitative studies are used to understand or describe a phenomena in depth, right? මොකක් හරි සංසිද්ධියක් අපි මෙච්චරකල් ගවේෂණය කළා නැති ලොකුවට ගැඹුරින් ගවේෂණය කරා, right? Then we use qualitative studies also as a prerequisite to the development of quantitative tools, right? Say if you want to measure, say, stigma on a particular disease, or social support or support from health staff on a particular condition, right? Rather than researcher thinking of the specific questions, okay, these should be in the questionnaire, right? You can do a prior qualitative study among the relevant patients or people and really understand what are the type of support mechanisms, right? And so on. And using that study, you can construct the items in your questionnaire so that your questionnaire is very well adapted to your study population, right? Rather than using a questionnaire which is developed elsewhere in the world. So you use qualitative studies in sort of developing a questionnaire from at a scratch, and also in cultural adaptation and validation of questionnaires which are prepared elsewhere. You can also use qualitative studies to elaborate or understand the findings of quantitative research. Suppose a finding of quantitative research gives says that particular type of patients are more vulnerable to say sort of drop compliance to drugs, right? So that comes in the questionnaire as a finding, but then you want to see why, what really happens. So to explain that, you can do a qualitative study afterwards so that you know what really happens. All right. If you have any questions, please, you can interrupt me and ask, right? So that is a brief entering into what qualitative methods research is, right? Next, we will move on to qualitative methods, right? Knowing the different, to get to know the different data collection methods. There are a lot of types of data collection methods, right? Lots of types of new methods coming upon, right? But there are very useful for main types of qualitative methods which we are going to understand today, right? They are participant observation, in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, and textual analysis on written documents of participants, right? So we will have a look on all four of these data collection methods. Okay. I hope you can see the screen fully.
We can see, madam.
Right. So let's talk about in-depth interviews first, because it is the most widely used technique, specifically by health researchers, right? Or qualitative health research. So interview is something that happens between two individuals, in-depth interview. So from the name implies, it goes in depth into the particular theme, right? So it's a qualitative technique used to elicit a rich picture of a participant's perspective or participant's standpoint, right? So in qualitative research, the output of the method, right? So say we are doing an interview, we get some information. We use the term knowledge for that information, right? Generally, as sort of scientific people or medical officers, we mean knowledge. By knowledge, we mean what's there in books, right? Or papers. But in qualitative research, knowledge generation, that is what we call term the findings, right? So by talking between two people, you develop knowledge. So this ambiguous drawing by the Danish psychologist Rubin, right, gives an idea of interviews. So if you can see this drawing, you once in one aspect, in one dimension, you will see two faces, right? Two people talking together. So an in-depth interview is interview, right? View between two people, right? Interaction between two people, right? But in another dimension, you see a vase-like structure, right? So by the interaction of these two people, there develops a sort of large vase-like structure, which we call the knowledge, right? And it's very important that the researcher is very conscious of what is being developed, right? So in-depth interviews always have a structure and a conversation that has a structure and a purpose, right? And the interviewer do careful questioning and listening, right, to obtain a in-depth understanding. So interviews can take around, say, 45 minutes or 30 minutes to 2 hours, right? So as you see in this picture, this is the interviewer and this is the interviewee, right? So interviewer will ask questions according to an interview guide. I will show you a picture of an interview guide, which we prepare during the designing of the study, right? So you usually go by an interview guide so that you don't miss anything that you need, but you don't have to stick to the interview guide, such as in quantitative questionnaires, right? හරියටම ඒකම අහන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. So while the knowledge keeps generating, you can use that to go more in depth into the topic that is investigated, right? So that is in-depth interviews. So in any type of qualitative studies, you have to take permission, right? While you are doing, you do recording with permission, right? And you also take down notes. So if the interviewer, if it is inconvenient for the interviewer to take down notes, Another person who is a note taker can be by the side of the interview, not disturbing the interviewer process, and take down notes. All right, so that is about interviews. And in-depth interviews are specifically used in topics where you want to obtain sensitive information about a particular topic, right? Very private sort of information, sensitive or emotional information about a topic where you cannot discuss that with other people, right? So in-depth interviews can be used for other topics as well, but preferably for such sort of interviews, sort of studies, we use interviews. So this is one of the example studies which we used interviews, right? This is about life stressors of rural, actually a population in Anuradhapura, right? Which we conducted few years back, whom have attempted self-harm, right? And whose households are associated with alcohol usage. So this particular researcher conducted about 40 in-depth interviews with such participants, who have had exposure to self-harm and where alcohol usage was prominent in their households, and came up with certain sorts of hypotheses on the phenomenon. So you can go to the link and read the paper. Right. The second type of methods is called the focus group discussions, right? So as implied by the picture, there are a lot of people. So focus groups are used to explore the experience of a theme common to a homogeneous group of people, right? එක වගේ පිරිසකට පොදු මාතෘකාවක් ගැන කරුණු කාරණා සොයන්න, right? For example, it may be a group of women in a village, right? A group of adolescents. So if we talk about adolescent, it can be a group of female adolescents separately and a group of male adolescents separately, because that common group will talk together on a particular topic that is common to them, right? So in a focus group, so before doing a focus group as well, we have to prepare a focus group guide similar to the interview guide, right? In a focus group, now there are participants usually sitting in a circle, and there's a moderator who is conducting or mediating the focus group, right? So the moderator is the trained researcher on asking questions, knowing about the topic, and he or she poses questions to the group, and he or she controls the group dynamics, right? So you have to see whether everyone is expressing their opinion, right? Everyone is talking. If someone is silent, you have to give the opportunity to that person, right? And if someone is over talking, right, you have to very tactfully stop him and let the others speak. Likewise. So going through these dynamics, you explore about a common topic and the opinion of this group of people regarding the particular topic. Similarly, as in in-depth interviews, there could be a note taker within the group who is taking down notes. And similarly, as in interviews, you should record the focus group conversation. Usually we keep the recorder in the middle so you can capture every voice, right? So always before recording, you have to take the permission. I hope you are clear. So this is a study conducted among adolescents. So when we were appointed as MOHs at Beruwala, at one time of life, right? That's where the first youth-friendly health services were established in the field. So we established a youth-friendly health service center, but no one was coming. So we wanted to know why adolescents are not coming to seek help from the youth-friendly reproductive health services. So we conducted separate focus group among adolescent girls and adolescent boys and identified the reasons why exactly adolescents in this context are not coming to reach help, take help from medical officers, right, or services. I have the link afterwards in the lecture for that paper. Right. And the third and the most coolest mechanism of data collection in qualitative studies is participant observation, right? So it's really justifiable that participant observation is one of the best methods because we all know what people say in in-depth interviews or maybe in focus groups, right, can be quite different from how they really behave, right? Okay, so therefore, participant observation, which includes researcher lives with the participants and learn about them, observe the participants, right? So researcher, as you can see in this picture, this is a foreign person, a researcher who lives with this tribal African group and learn about the group. So the researcher has to sort of adopt his or her behaviors to be sort of a member of the group, although he's an outsider, right? Likewise. So, and participates in the daily activities, right? So participant observation, mostly it's done in field research, right? As you can see, it's more feasible as field research, right? And usually done by social scientists or anthropologists, right? But really, you can actually practice participant observation or use it as a method in hospital setting as well, because we are medical officers, because we are invariably we are in the wards and we will be observing people. So if you do it in a systematic manner, you can just justify it as a participant observation. So while doing ward rounds, helping patients, doing counseling, right, taking histories, so the researcher can act as in such ways and be a participant observer, right, and conduct the study. So during participant observation, you really observe what is happening, right? That does not mean that you are silent and just observing and taking down notes. You can always talk with people. You can hold informal conversations with people to clarify things, right? So you live with them and learn what happens, right? So at the end of the day, the observer has to sit on his desk and write down everything that he has observed. So usually while traveling, you take jot down your things, right? Using shorthand or pictures or diagrams likewise. But then after coming home, you have to write an expanded field note of really what you saw about pertaining to your research topic, right? What you observed during the day. And that is called the field note, right? So these are some of the pictures from the ECLIPSE study that is on cutaneous leishmaniasis. We are studying the patient journey and stigma on CL, where researchers live in the environment. So these are researchers actually. They were living in the villages with people in most highly susceptible areas of Anuradhapura district, right? And participating in daily activities such as farming, right? And learning about what happens. So if a person get a wound, how does he or she behave, right? What are the beliefs they have, right? When do they go to hospital? When do they seek help? And so on. So as I mentioned, participant observation, now we have been sort of experimenting it in the clinical setting as well. So this is from one of the slides of a student presentation where they observed breastfeeding support mechanisms in postnatal wards of the teaching hospital Anuradhapura, right? So it was a mixed method study, and initially they actually did participant observation throughout 24 hours to identify positive and negative aspects of breastfeeding support. So these are some of the observations they have made, right? And then using those observations, they developed a questionnaire on breastfeeding support, right? And this is one of the findings of the particular questionnaire. So 46% of Anuradhapura postpartum mothers receive support for expressing breast milk. So that is very high, right? For expressing breast milk, that is very high, not merely breastfeeding support. And you see that the quantitative findings are well explained by qualitative results here, while they interact right? And this is a pick from a study where you use participant observation to see whether you can use spirometry among adolescents, right? What are the barriers? What are the challenges that the person face? So that is one of Shashanka's student research. Thank you for giving me the pick. And likewise, so you see that there is enough opportunity for us to understand the reality even in the clinical setting by using or adopting qualitative methods. So, the last method, data collection method we are going to talk about is analyzing the written documents of participants or patients, right? So we are lucky as a country because the literacy levels of our people are very high. Participants or Sri Lankan people really like to write, right? Specifically women, right? They like to document their expressions, feelings, experiences. So these are some of the documents that we can use to collect data where patients write about themselves. You can maintain patient or participant diaries, right? Where you write about a particular topic. So there are specific guidelines that we could provide in sort of formulating a diary, right? You have to give instructions. You can include a model diary page so that the participant can read it and understand, okay, this is how I should write my diary, right? Specific introductions, you can structure the diary, and so on. And we have developed another new tool. We call it the Patient Experience Reflection Journal, where a patient of a particular disease could write on the experience from the starting point to getting cured throughout the whole process, right? And maybe draw diagrams of help seeking and so on. So this type of techniques are very feasible during specific circumstances such as COVID-19 pandemic, where you cannot have sort of one-to-one exposure, but not in even disastrous situations, but even actual situations, these are very successful. Here, the investigator freely writes because no one is there in front of him, so he can readily express without no tension. So that advantage is there, right? Assuming that the person writes actual or valid data documentation, right? You can also use open-ended questions right? Maybe at the end of a quantitative questionnaire, you can add a qualitative open-ended question. I hope you know what an open-ended question is. A question that let the person or participant write a story, right? Not an yes, no, not giving an yes, no, or no answer, but to write a story, such as, say, we can you remember when you first identify this problem in your body? What was your reaction to that? How did your family members respond to it? What were your experiences? So these are all open-ended questions. So you can get just the answer for that and do an analysis or a study. So this is one of the papers which used the patient experience reflection journal. So you can see the details while going through this paper combined with interviews, right? So a diary, if you use, you can also always conduct after collecting the diary, going through the diary, you can construct an interview guide and do a post diary interview to clarify things written in the diary, right? We call them post diary or post purge, we call the short name, interviews, right? So you can combine methods. So how do you decide? So you got to know about different types of qualitative research techniques. How do you decide what sort of technique do I use for my study, right? So it may depend upon the theme of the study as I described earlier, right? So sensitive issues, personal issues, in-depth interviews, common topics, focus groups, right? It also may be according to the feasibility, as I mentioned in, say, in sort of pandemic situations, we cannot do interviews. Or it's always easy to ask someone to write something, right? Likewise. And you can also use multiple methods in the same study, right? And that is a way of making your study stronger. You call it triangulation. Triangulation is collecting the same type of data through different sources, right? So you give a diary and conduct an interview as well, or you discuss with, say, pregnant women on a particular topic, and you also interview public health midwives who knows the topic as well, and combine their data, analyze, and produce a combined analysis so that your data credibility is high, right? So when you write the proposal or article manuscript, you write the study design, right? Including these particular type of methods you use. So maybe this is a qualitative design. We used in-depth interviews of this type of patients and focus group discussions among healthcare workers. Likewise, you can include what exactly your design is in the study methods. So if you are talking about the proposal or the manuscript, as you know, when you write the methods, you have to first include the study design, right? Then you have to include the study setting, which is similar to quantitative studies. You describe the setting, the village, or maybe the characteristics of the village, characteristic of the institution, characteristics of the district where your research is going to take place, right? But if you are dealing with sensitive information and say the participants are sort of identifiable in some sort of manner, right? Say if you are conducting a particular study on a small village, say on diabetes patients, or let's say on okay, let's take people with cutaneous leishmaniasis, there may be only few people in that village. If you are collecting sensitive information, right, of course, we never publish the name of the person, participant, right? We use a pseudonym, right? Or we use a sort of a serial number or a code to identify the participant. Even if we do so, if it is a small village, when we describe about the participant, someone could track who this person is. In such situations, we do not mention the exact name of the particular village, right? Or maybe the particular district, right? So such ethical concerns are there when you are doing qualitative studies. Right. I hope you are clear up to now. Then one of the most common questions on qualitative data or fingers pointing into qualitative research is, okay, what is the sampling method? How do you select the sample? Is it adequate getting people like that? The sampling number size, is it adequate? So these are the questions proposed by researchers, right? So if, of course, there are systematic ways of adopting sampling qualitative research and systematic ways of determining the sampling size in qualitative research. So you have to adhere to those. In qualitative research, you can do purposive sampling, quota sampling, or snowball sampling, right? Purposive sampling is researcher purposefully selects participants to represent a population. Say, I want to study about a particular phenomena on pregnant women, right? I go to the clinics, I select the clinics, right? And I go to the clinic, and with the help of the midwife, I would identify different types of mothers who will represent the phenomena, right? It may be mothers with different educational levels, mothers with different ethnicities, right? Different socioeconomic status, right? So likewise, you purposefully, rather than getting a convenient sample where, say, you pick the mothers who are present on that day or something like that, that's convenient sampling, right? You purposefully select so that you judge by getting this type of participant, I will have another aspect, or I will widen the scope of my data collection or knowledge produced, right? So you purposefully select people. Quota sampling is, it's like stratified sampling in quantitative studies. So you get a quota from each type of population, right? A specific number of people from Tamil ethnicity, specific number of people from Sinhala ethnicity, right? Likewise. Snowball sampling is, it's done when you really cannot readily grab participants, right, for a particular research, such as in sensitive issues such as HIV or STIs, right, or studies among prostitutes, right, or even studies where on rare diseases, where a patient, we catch one patient, right? So we ask him permission to come for as a participant, right? And then we ask that person, do you know similar patients in your village? Because they would probably know, because they are attending the same clinic, right? So rather than we are going by house to house to identify people with a particular disease, snowballing, right, will help you to identify participants in a quicker manner, right? Or chain referral sampling. Why it is called snowballing? When a snowball falls from top of the hill to the bottom, right? Gradually, the size of the snowball get larger and larger because of addition of snow, right? Likewise, we start from one patient. And gradually that patient brings 2 participants. That 2 participants brings 4 participants. Likewise, you can enlarge or increase the sample. So those are the different sampling methods that you can use. So you should mention in your proposal what the sampling method you used and specifically how you recruited the participants, used that, and so on. Sample size. So we don't use large samples such as hundreds, 200s, thousands in qualitative research. In qualitative research, we use the large sample or we calculate a sample size to avoid chance, right? To make inferential statistics, that is to refer that what we find from this particular sample is valid to the study population. That is why we calculate the sample size, right? But in qualitative studies, we go for a smaller sample. So one thing is we don't go into inferential statistics, right? Population estimates in qualitative studies. We just focus on a particular small group of people or small population and go in depth on the down to the phenomena, right? And the other thing is large number of people does not matter in quantitative studies because it's just one sort of response in the database where you find the analysis, right, outcomes. But in qualitative studies, you have to analyze by patient to patient, right? So you cannot go through large transcripts developed by transcribing, that is typing all the documents produced during interviews and so on. So you have to do it manually, go through them manually, identify codes. So it's very takes time. So you maximum would be sort of 60, like, right? So usually in MPhils and PhD, you limit to 30 or 40 people sometimes. And in simple studies, you can even start from 6 or 10 people. And the point is where we limit, the point of limitation is the point of data saturation, right? So what is data saturation? Data saturation is, so okay, you start with 5 people, you inquire about their experience, you get some information, right? You go for the 6th person. At a 6th person, you ask the same questions, you get some information and you get new information as well, apart from the what you got now. So then you have to add another one. So you keep on adding until the researcher feel තව කොච්චර ඇහුවත් මෙච්චර තමයි, right? That is data saturation. So you do not get more or added new knowledge by adding another subject to your study. So that is data saturation. So usually common phenomena, you achieve data saturation around 12, 15 or 20, likewise. So it depends according to the theme and the scope of study as well. But always you can justify your sample according to these facts. I hope it's clear. If you have any questions, you can interrupt me. All right. So we learn about the specific techniques, sampling, and sample size. And then there are specific procedures that you conduct during qualitative data collection, right? So we have to be trained to collect qualitative data. So this does not mean training for 3 months or as such, right? Even a one-day workshop would do. So such as things like how to conduct a good qualitative interview. There are tips, right? So there are reading material. You can practice. So what you do is you develop the interview guide. You practice with your friend, right? Then you record it. You listen to it. You can go to an actual patient, pilot test the interview guide, and practice with the patient first and listen to the recording. So while listening to the recording, your first recording, right, you will understand මට මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ මීට වැඩිය හොඳට අහන්න තිබුණා, right? I would have asked this in this manner. If I asked another question, additional question, the patient would have give this information. I have missed it. So such things comes. Usually in the first interview, we are very sort of anxious, right? We sort of do it such as in a quantitative study, getting yes, no answers, short answers likewise. But that becomes a problem when we go to analysis or presenting data, because in qualitative studies, you present the excerpts or what people say, right? So the longer the person or participant talks or tell the story, right, it is advantageous for the researcher, right? If the participant just remain from stating one or two sentences for the question, that is disadvantage. That means that's superficial, right? You have not gone in depth to the question. So you have to have the particular dynamics, make the participant relax, right? Make the participant trust you, right? Be comfortable, right? Have the intended body language and conduct the interview. So for that, you need to have a little bit of polishing up your skills, right? So we mentioned in the proposal that the data collectors were trained, right? If you are using a research assistant or somebody, we have to train them with a qualitative expert. Then you have to mention about participant recruitment, specifically in qualitative studies. The reviewers, they expect who reached the participants, right? Who introduced that you introduced the study, where did you reach the participants, at a convenient place to the participant, maybe in the residence, at the convenient time to the participant. So these small ethical concerns are very important in qualitative research because it's about sort of sensitive information. You have to give the consent forms, information leaflets, let the patients read them, understand, ask questions, and voluntarily say their wish or allow us that they wish to participate. So this is a section of an interview guide, right? When you prepare the interview guide, you can have, say, in an interview, you may be asking questions on different subtopics, right? This particular interview guide was for studying respectful maternity care during delivery, right? So this is the first area that the researcher wants us to acquire knowledge, the birth experience of the mother, right, who has delivered. So there are a lot of areas. I took only one because the slide is limited. So you generate the main or large question first. How do you feel about your previous labor and childbirth experience, if you have any, right? We ask the person. That is your intention, broad intention. But say now, if you ask that from a mother, sometimes the mother will tell a story, but sometimes the mother will say, oh, all right, it's good. I was relatively happy. Or a mother would say, oh gosh, it was something like hell or something, and stop there. So to avoid that, avoid the conversation being stopped, right? We use probing questions, right? So you can see probing questions. So in addition to the main questions, you just jot down probing questions that you could ask the participants so that you can elaborate the story of the participants. So when formulating the interview guide, you list your major questions and probing questions. Usually when you are asking for ethical clearance, you have to present the interview guide, right? Okay. Then Okay, so you conduct and they collect data. While conducting interviews or participant observation, you have to write your field notes. It's very important to write, right? So sometimes the recorders does not work, they become erased, right? So it's very important to write down your notes or observations. So observations in the sense, not only what people say, but also what you see, the difference in facial expressions, how they react. All these are very important when you come to qualitative research. So you can have tape recorders, right? There are many available in shops, or you can use your phones to record, right? So you record the uh, data with consent. So while getting consent, you have to mention the participant that say we say a mother අම්මා අපි මේක රෙකෝඩ් කරනවා මේක රෙකෝඩ් කරන්නේ අම්මා කියන දේ අපිට සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම දැනගන්න ඕනේ හින්දා මොකද ලියන්න ගියාම අපේ අතින් හැලෙන මග හැරෙන කොටස වැඩි ඒ හින්දා අපි මේක අහලා මේ පරීක්ෂණය අවසන් වෙච්ච ගමන් මේක අහලා මේ ටික ටයිප් කරලා මේ රෙකෝඩින් එක මකලා දානවා right ඒක කාටවත් ඇහෙන්න දාන්නේ එහෙම නැහැ අම්මගේ privacy and confidentiality we will protect that we have to say that so that is how you take permission for recording right so once you record things and once you write notes actually, on the same day, you have to expand the notes, say after a focus group discussion. So during the discussion, you can just jot down things, but then after the discussion, you have to expand what you observed and fill up the notes, right? And recordings, you transcribe. That means the audio recordings, you type it, right? That process we called transcribing. And what you get, the paper, you after, or the soft copy, you get after transcribing, we call it the transcript, right? So when you're transcribing, remember, you have to transcribe exactly what you hear in the recordings, right? So if a person describes about his experience, you have to write in exact words that the patient uses. Not මෙයා මෙහෙම කිව්වා කියලා අපි ලියන්නේ නැහැ. Not in our words. Exactly in patient's word. If you hear any noises, you in the transcript, you exactly report that. You put in brackets, another person comes and interrupt the doctor likewise. So that you know the context where the study is happening well, right? So that is about the main procedures during data collection. So actually, I can talk days about individual methods, right? So it's vast. So today we are doing only an introduction, right? After data collection, we have to store data. This is again very important because there is a lot of data, right? A lot of transcript. You cannot double them, right? You have to systematically store them in different files, right? If they are hard copies, name the files, store them, right? Remove actual identification data, put pseudonyms, right? And store the files. Or even in your PC, you store in different folders in clear name categorizations, right? And using pseudonymization in password protected files. So why I relate all this? Because when you're asking for ethical clearance for your research, you have to indicate all this in your proposals and application. Right. Now, this particular slide, I'm not going to the details of it, right? One of the main questions, as I told you before, is aren't qualitative studies biased? Right? Patients la කීප දෙනෙක්ගෙන් අහලා ගන්න එක අපි ඔක්කොටම හරි කියලා කියන්නේ කොහොමද? right? Bias නැද්ද? So isn't it the researcher's interpretation, right? Those are the questions, right? Those are the challenges. But we have a set of precautions to take in conducting research where we can protect the trustworthiness of qualitative research, or in quantitative sense we call it validity and reliability of the research, right? So basically, if you collect data for a longer time and collect intense data, that means you have a lot of data. That means you represent a large area, and that is rich and strong, right? If your data is rich, how does the data become rich in qualitative methods? As I told you, if the interviewer is trained, right? If the field note taker is well trained to write field notes, the data becomes rich. If the participant is well instructed to write the diary, the data becomes rich. So adhering to particular standards, by that you get rich data, so that the data is credible rather than just pointing out our findings based on superficial data. So as I mentioned, triangulation is collecting information on the particular topic through different sources. Sources means you can either use different methods to collect data on one single topic, or you can use different types of participants to collect data on one single topic. So when you write the proposal, you can write a section on maintaining trustworthiness of data or maintaining quality assurance of data, and include what type of methods you adopted to ensure quality of data, right? Reflexivity is this. Now, say, if you are doing participant observation on, say, healthcare staff in a ward, right? If they know that you are observing them, right, they will adopt their behavior, because knowing that there is a research going on, they will talk to the mothers in a very friendly manner, knowing that there is research. So reflexivity is, researcher is sensitive to the changes that occur in the behavior of the participant due to the research, right? Researcher is sensitive. So how do we tackle this? So invariably, we cannot sort of ask them not to. We can, initially when we are introducing the research, we have to mention the participants. Now, because of doing the research, you should not change your behaviors. What we want is the actual behaviors that you do on normal days, right? That is the importance for the what is important for the research. But you can mention that, you should mention that. And also sometimes, so this happens, the change in behavior happens for 1 or 2 days, then they forget about the research and they usually go for the normal behavior. So that's okay. And mostly the researcher can maintain a memo book, right? Once you identify a problem like that, you document a memo, put a memo in the book. Okay, I was doing observation, but this particular person in this behavior, I think it's sort of artificial, right? Because in analysis, right, you can consider the memo book, and the memo book can influence your interpretations, right? So you are not going to merely say, okay, this person's behavior is very good, despite not being sensitive to the change, right? So have a memo book while doing research. Negative cases means, if you are studying, say, a study on using prosthesis after mastectomy, so you want to know the experiences of using prosthesis after mastectomy. So you interview patients who use prosthesis, but then so you get one point of view only. You can also have negative cases, patients who do not use prosthesis and get their experience. 1 or 2 negative cases might be enough, so that you have sort of credible or balance in your data. Now, out of these, triangulation and respondent validation are some things that can be easily performed in sort of simple, even in simple research, right? What is respondent validation? At the end of the interview, right, you present a summary of the interview to the respondent, that is to the participant. Okay, now we talked about 1 hour on this topic. I will tell you a summary. So according to you, these are your concerns on this particular topic. This is how you behave. These are your experiences. Am I right if I say so? Right? So you validate it with the participant at the end of the procedure. And if the participant says, okay, yes, that's what I really meant, you are correct, that's validation. Sometimes the participant might say, no, doctor, you have misunderstood me. This is not what I meant. So that is again, if you are correcting that, that is validation, right? Okay. So you can talk about validity and generalizability, right? So usually now qualitative techniques usually they originated in the field of psychology and social sciences. Usually social scientists or anthropologists, they readily say we do not generalize, right? This is about this particular people, right? But there is no point in doing qualitative research, health research, if we cannot sort of represent the at least the immediate group of people, right? So we adopt all the sampling methods and all to do that. But once you collect data also, when you go through your transcripts, if an expert on the field, you go through the transcripts and finds මේ නං කියලා තියෙන්නේ ඔක්කොම බොරු, right? These are not correct information. These are false beliefs and all. So that is poor face validity. But if a person feel that going through the transcript, yes, according to this topic and what my experience, this data is possible, right? That is approving face validity. And we also mention, now say we conduct a study on antenatal mothers, so we select few mothers, whether this particular study would represent the mothers in, say, Agampodi Central, right, or Anuradhapura district, external validation, right? Internal and external. Whether this, say, 10 mothers represent that particular type of mothers, or are we able to externalize? Can we sort of generalize this to rural mothers in rural areas? So you can discuss these factors in the discussion of the manuscript. Okay. There are a lot of ethical concerns regarding qualitative studies, but usually when we are writing the ethical aspects, we usually write, okay, ethical clearance was obtained by this committee, right? And we obtain consent from the participants. That's all we write. But if you go through this slowly, sometime later, right, you will identify that there are a lot of ethical concerns at every stage of qualitative research. Not only in qualitative, actually, this is common to all. But then I just don't want to describe this because the time is limited. But then have an idea that ethical aspects are there in all the steps during qualitative research. All right. Any questions up to now? So I have few minutes to get you through analysis and presentation. Right. Now, so you have your data, right? The transcripts are available, written or typed documents are available. Then you have to conduct analysis. Again, there are numerous ways to analyze qualitative data. right? These are different types of methods. What we most commonly use is the thematic analysis, right? Where you categorize into themes, starting from what is given by the patient or participant. You inductively analyze them and categorize the findings into themes. That is what you generally mean by thematic analysis. Framework analysis is when you are sort of categorizing the data available according to an already available framework. So there are different sets of, say, frameworks, guidelines, right? And so on. If you are categorizing according to an well-established guideline or framework, that is usually that means you are conducting framework analysis. If you are analyzing the story, that means you are doing a narrative analysis. So there are few others as well. So these are the basic analysis methods that we as health professionals use. Right. So analysis, you can use softwares available, mentioned, or you do manual analysis. So all this time, basically, I have conducted manual analysis, right? Because one thing is, although you use softwares, the artificial intelligence, there is no artificial intelligence in the software, right? You have to code, you have to go through the data and label, right? So, but the advantage of using software is you can manage large sets of data, and you can have different beautiful sort of presentations on data, presenting types of flow diagrams and so on, right? But the problem is the databases are not readily available for us, right? You have to pay and retrieve databases. Some are there, like Deduce. Right. Now I want you to take 2 minutes and just read this before we go into analysis. So this is a diary page, right? So you see the participant documents about relationships, right? Relationships with the family, villagers, neighbors, friends, right? And this is what the particular researcher, the coding person, has done. He has sort of highlighted sections of data and has given a label to the particular section, right? So at present, just notice that only. Right. So the basic in qualitative analysis is identify a code, right? So you have written transcripts. You are going to identify codes. So what is a code? A code is a segment of data, a segment, right? So it can be a sentence, a word, a phrase, or a small group of sentences, a paragraph, right? A segment of data that derives a meaning according to the study objectives, right? So if you go back, අද මම ගොඩක් සතුටින් හිටිය දවසක් අද මගේ මහත්තයටත් නිවාඩු නිසා එයා දවසම මාත් එක්ක ගෙදර හිටියා. So this particular researcher want to identify the relationships of pregnant women. This is a pregnant mother. So you see that being with husband at home has made the mother happy, right? So that would be sort of one segment that the researcher need, and that's a code, right? And you highlight it and put something here. And what you put here, a label that is called the code label. So the code label can merely just represent what is there. So you see here, the code label is feel happy when husband is at home, right? So it's very easy. Now, there are a lot of practical tips. It's very easy when you label the code at the most ground level, right? So maybe another researcher would code this as maybe family relationships or relationship with husband. But then the code does not actually represent what is there, right? So it's best that the code is splitted, right, to the smallest extent, and it represent or label represent what is there. අම්මා උයලා තිබුණ නිසා දවල්ට එච්චරම වැඩ තිබුණේ right? So she get help from the mother. That is also a benefit of the relationship, right? Mother's support is there, right? So you label it as so. Likewise, so that is a code, right? So there are principles in analysis, right? Firstly, it's always advantageous if you know about the theme. You have read the literature on the theme. That is always advantageous for analysis, that you know about the theme. Because if you have background knowledge, you will capture the codes more, right? That is one thing. Then you should familiarize yourself with the data available. Now, if you have your own conducted the interviews yourself, right? Of course, then you know about the data. But if someone else conducted the interviews, you need to go through the transcripts first, over and over again, to familiarize with the data, right? Then what the researcher do is, the researcher keep the objective or the specific objective or the theme of the research in the back of the mind, right? Okay, mage objective එක මේක, to explore the relationship of pregnant mothers with the family, or explore the experiences, post-op experiences of patient undergoing this, post-op experiences. So keep that in mind. And the researcher fixed the mind to the objective and go through the data. So keeping that in mind, you go through the data. So always there's a connection. Okay, this is my objective. Do I have anything related to my objective within this data, right? So when you find the minimum segment that could relate to your objective, you highlight it, right, and label it. That is called coding. So you identify codes to the relevant topic, you label the codes, right? And you finally list the code, have a code list of codes, and you prepare a coding scheme. I want to take you through a small exercise. I hope you can see this, right? So this is, as mentioned, the source is there, right? So the pregnant women of the Rajarata pregnancy cohort got a handbook, and we asked to write some descriptions in this handbook and tear the pages and hand it over to our follow-up visit, because it was a cohort. And we want to know what the mothers perceive of their midwife, right? So we entered this and left a space. අපේ midwife නෝනා ගැන මට හිතෙන්නේ මෙහෙම, right? So this is one of the mother's description about the midwife. Can you go through this description and find me the first code you get, and maybe find the consequent codes? So the objective is mother's perceptions on the midwife. Okay, so because we have limited time, let's see how you do it. Now we have this option in Word, where we go to the review pane, right? In the ribbon, you go to the review pane and you can select new comments, right? Option. So what you do is you highlight, you go through the data, චූටි පැටියෙක් මවගේ කුසට එන්නත් කලින් ඉඳලම මට උදව් කරන කෙනෙක්. So here comes the first code. So what it is? So the mothers perceive that the PHM would help mothers even before conceiving. So you highlight it, put a comment and label it. Helps starts before conception. That would be your label. So you need not worry too much about how you name the label initially, right? Of course, you can go through the labels later and refine them with good words, right? So you keep on coding like this. So again, when you go through, පිළිසිඳ ගන්න ඉස්සර වෙලාම, right? බෙහෙත් දීලා දරුවාගේ නිරෝගීකම ගැන here, what does behet means? Now, it's important to know the reality, right? You should know the background. Here, behet means maybe the vitamins, right? Most probably, right? Which is given to the mother prior, probably folic acid, which causes promote health of the newborn. So that could be another code, right? Maybe use vitamins would be one code, and concern about the health of the newborn, another code. So likewise, you keep on going through this and put your codes. So you might just think, of course, all of us know about that there is something called conceptional care. What is the point? But remember, you don't do research for your sort of just to present to your own community, but you're generating global evidence, right? So by coding here, now not many countries have public health midwives. Maybe Sri Lanka is the only country which has a public health midwives, and to know, to inform others that preconceptional care is provided, it's a huge thing. So that's why you don't miss anything, right? දොස්තරගෙන් පස්සේ අපේ දෙවනි දොස්තර midwife නෝනා. So when we went through this type of transcripts, we saw that the mother sort of simulate midwife for many persons. They say that she is my teacher, she is my doctor, she is my friend, she is like my mother. So it's very important to grab these codes because it reflects. This is the sort of type of perception that the Sri Lankan mothers have on the midwife. She is so close to mothers in such manner. That is very important. So that is how you code, right? I'm sorry, I don't have time to present the full coding. Okay. So in Prabhata, I hope I hope I can take additional 15 minutes.
Yes, madam.
So in the process, now, because you have to write the proposal, you have to know the techniques. So what we do is, first 2 investigators, right, who is able to analyze data, will independently code the same transcripts, right? We do not share first. We independently code the transcript, and we then get together and compare our codes, right? And then come into a consensus. Okay, these are the codes that we will use to code the rest of the transcripts, right? Initially, you code few, say 3 or 4 transcripts independently, discuss, get into a consensus, and prepare an organized list of codes, right? So this organized list of codes is called the coding scheme. So coding scheme is developed by coding few transcripts initially, right? And then you are going to apply that coding scheme to all the transcripts. So I relate this because these procedures you need to write in your proposal or manuscript, right? So when you develop the coding scheme, although merely in the sense of a coding scheme contains only codes, list of codes, actually you can enter or categorize the codes into sub-themes and major themes within the coding scheme as well. I will show you an example, right? Or you can use an Excel workbook to include verbatim excerpts that reflect specific codes, right? So we see. Now this is the part of a coding scheme, which I mentioned, the breastfeeding study done by medical undergraduates. So these are the lists of codes, you see, right? So you see they have categorized the codes into sub-themes. So this is about breastfeeding support, right? So there are major themes and sub-themes, right? So sometimes the environment is a support for breastfeeding, right? And there are different aspects of the environment which is supportive and which is not supportive, right? And the major theme is, or when you combine all these sub-themes together, you can formulate the major theme, supportive or non-supportive environmental factors, right? Then there are healthcare worker related factors, right? So first you go through the data, right? Code the data. You don't think about the major themes first. When you code the data, you get to know, your mind works, right? Okay, there are sub-themes like qualities, behaviors, dedication, likewise sub-themes, and you can categorize these sub-themes into major themes. So there are positive themes and negative themes, and the major theme is healthcare worker related supportive mechanisms. So likewise, within the same codebook, you can prepare or elaborate the major themes and sub-themes, and that is thematic analysis, right? If you can just have a glance at this, not to read. So these are sub-themes, right? And codes. This is a very small part of a large code book, right? But I wanted to show is, now if you are a PhD student or you are doing an MPhil, you need to highlight each and everything that the patients have told, participants have told, right? So what you can do is relevant to your objective. You can have the participants with a pseudonymized ID as columns, right? You have the code here, right? This is about CL. So people say that CL has an insidious onset. දන්නේම නැතුව තමයි මේ තුවාලය කියන්නේ කනවා දන්නේ නැහැ සතා, right? දන්නේම නැතුව තමයි ඇති වෙන්නේ. So the code related to that, you extract it and put it here. So ultimately, you know the codes and you have all the excerpts that a particular patient or participant have elaborated on all the codes. So everything is there. You need not go back to the transcripts when you do that. But of course, as you can see, it takes time. But then it's very easy to observe the patterns, categorize things when you use an Excel sheet to record analysis. Right. Okay. So that is just dipping into analysis, right? Of course, there are always resource material available. So I am really willing to help if any one of you are doing studies. So yeah. So let's see how we can present qualitative data, because the way of presenting is important from the designing stage, because if we know these are the methods of presenting, we can design the research well. So one of the ways is one of the commonest way of presenting qualitative data is to relate the theme. You mentioned the theme. So this is the adolescent study on using barriers to using reproductive care services, right? So one of the themes was privacy and confidentiality concerns, right? Then the researcher describes, you have to describe what you see from all the findings, right? So we say that they lack confidence, they are shy, right? Because their privacy is breached, right? And you describe it in a small paragraph and you add evidence to support what you stated, right? That is one way of presenting. So you see, this particular adolescent says, doctor asked me embarrassing questions in front of the mother. So the story goes, because of that, mother then questioned her after the doctor's visit. So she decides, I will never go to get medical advice regarding reproductive issues. So when you put the verbatim here, so the what people say is called a verbatim, right? Or a verbatim excerpt. We include who told that. So this can be, we can just simply describe who told that, such as an 18-year-old girl, or maybe you can put a sort of a serial number, right? We don't use the name. Protecting confidentiality, we state who mentioned that. So you can put one or two verbatim to support your description and the theme. You have access to the articles I describe with these links. The second way of presenting is you can present the data in a table, right? So this is on the social capital study, social relationship study, where you saw the transcript before. So this is about one of the constructs of social capital. I'm talking about domestic cohesion. You see, you can, if you want, you can define, right? And under domestic cohesion, you are talking about, this is the code or the descriptor, right? Feel happy when husband is around. Then you select the verbatim from the diary of the mother and you put it here. What I wanted to show is, so I did triangulation here, right? I also conducted interviews with the midwives. So you see, under the particular construct, I state what the mother says and what the midwife says. And you see that these two tally well, and this proves that this is true, right? It's a strength for the credibility of data. So you can present tables in your manuscript, or you can present flow diagrams. You need not read this. So this is about maternal deaths in a particular district where you did social autopsies and identified the social factors influencing maternal deaths. And you see all these factors going in, leading into maternal deaths, and you see the relationship between the factors. You can put in arrows, right? Stating the relationship between different social factors, right? So flow diagrams can be used to present data. You can use creative other mechanisms as well, using software such as bubble plots, right? To compare microgeographical differences of relationships. So I compared here different microgeographies, right? Madavachiya, Mihintale, Nuragampalata. So these bubbles indicate how the social relationships of mothers, neighborhood cohesion of mothers are. Or else you can come up with other sort of figures, right? So this is a study conducted, through interviews conducted on mothers, postpartum mothers, that is until up to 6 months life, about the breastfeeding experiences. And when we conducted study, we were able to see that there are barriers related to first 2 or 3 days. Then there is a set of barriers that comes into play around 2 to 3 weeks after delivery. Then there is another set of barriers for exclusive breastfeeding, which plays at around 4 to 6 months. So ideally, we have to exclusively breastfeed up to 6 months, but you see clusters of barriers. So when you present that, it's elaborative of rather than just listing the barriers, it's very elaborative and shows the real situation. You can also use word clouds. Now, this word cloud, this is not published yet, represent the causes of poor mental well-being among early pregnancy in pregnant women, right? So, representative of the causes. So, the size of the word, right, or the code represent that many mothers are having poor mental well-being due to nausea and vomiting, likewise. Okay, so that's all what I have to teach you today, right? If you are starting on qualitative research for the first time, this is the best book, right? Both myself and my husband, Professor Sunet, we learn qualitative research from this book. It's freely available at this link. And there are some more references which are helpful. So in summary, today we learn what qualitative research is, what are the research methods, and what are the particular procedures. Basically, how to analyze or what does qualitative analysis means, right? How to present qualitative data, and what are the resource materials available for you to learn about this. So actually, you are successful in qualitative research if you are honest, right? Because a researcher can always interpret wrongly. Researcher can always state what he wants, right, in qualitative research. So you have to be very honest to take the patient's perspective, right? You should have enthusiasm on learning during the process, right? To capture more knowledge, right? Go in depth of the knowledge, right? Mining the knowledge. You have to be enthusiastic. You have to know your methods, right? Read about them, ask them, develop your skills on communication, interview techniques, analysis, right? And of course, enjoy the process. Okay, that's the end of the presentation.